Okay. So ERI is, of course, an institution that's focused at various elements of food security. We work to reduce poverty and hunger. That's a major area of concern when it comes to food security. And we'd like to improve health because rice is good, but it just doesn't have too much nutrients. And we want to ensure that the production process help ensure environmental sustainability. Now, here's ERI. You visited it, but a little more background. We've been around since 1960, and it was founded by Ford and Rockefeller Foundation. We have 1,300 staff coming from 32 countries. Of the 1,300 staff, about 400 are internationals, and about 90% of the staff is located here in Los Baños. The rest are in 17 country offices across the globe. Most of them in Asia, but we also have offices in Latin America, particularly in Uruguay, and we just inaugurated a major breeding hub in Bujumbura, in Burundi. So that will serve fundamentally East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa in collaboration with Africa Rice. We are an autonomous non-government outfit. You might call us an NGO, but we do have a character as an international organization similar to what the UN does. And finally, all of our funding is from governments and philanthropies. There's a minor bit of funding from private, but in general, it's all government and it's all from philanthropies. Our rough budget for this year is $19 million, 2/3 from governments and 1/3 from one man, Bill Gates. Rich guy, lots of money, willing to fund rice research. Now, if you're here in the Philippines declared 2013 as the National Year of Rice. July was Nutrition Month, and next week is National Biotechnology Week. So we have all kinds of excuses to do something, and all kinds of attention focused on rice and food security. And in the Philippines, like in many other countries, we work closely with governments to monitor, implement, shape, strategize on their rice research programs. This, for example, is our Director General, Bob Ziegler, signing an agreement this year with the Minister of Agriculture of the Philippines, Proceso Alcala, on the President's Food Security Program. We do this in most of the countries where we work. 2 weeks ago, we signed a major agreement with the President of Burundi on the Burundi National Rice Sector Program. Problem that we face is that there are at least 1 billion hungry people across the globe. And in fact, most of these hungry people are located in Asia, the area that produces 90% of the world's rice. So we produce rice, but we still have a lot of hungry people. And a lot of these hungry people are located mostly in South Asia, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And we're producing more and more people. And the number of hungry people then increases over time. And depending on your population projections globally, we may have as many as 10 billion people by 2040. Or if some famine hits us, we may have as low as 7.5 billion. Right now, the medium-term projections are a little over 8 billion people by 2040. The question is, how do we feed all of these people? But in fact, across Asia and many parts of the world, we like rice. And we're getting to like it more and more. If you stay here any longer in the Philippines, you'll immediately find out that one of the most popular restaurants are those unlimited rice restaurants, where you order a little bit of viand, meat or fish, and then they'll give you mountains of rice to go with that. Or some soup, and you pour it over a mountain of rice, and that's what you eat. That's a very popular dish, very popular meal. Globally, we all consume roughly 65 kilos per head per year. In the Philippines, officially, the number is 117 kilos per head per year. In a country like Indonesia, anybody from Indonesia here? Indonesia? Nobody. Indonesia, 135 kilos per head per year. Myanmar, I guess nobody from Myanmar here. 230 kilos per head per year. Can you imagine? Now, North America is roughly about 30 kilos per head per year. Japan, 35 kilos per head per year. You notice that the poorer the country is, especially if they're a rice-eating country, they eat more rice. That's the source of the carbohydrates. That's the source of the protein. So we estimate that we need to produce globally at least 8 to 10 million more metric tons of rice per year. 8 to 10 million more metric tons. And that's a lot of rice. In a situation where growth in yields has fallen over time. 70s to 90s growth in rice yields were roughly about 2%. Now it's only barely about 1% per year. And it's a science problem. It's not a political problem. It's not a question of programs. It's not a question of political will. It's a question of the application of science to your production systems. And where do you get that science? We have worsening resource scarcities. We're running out of land. We're running out of water. We're generating more people. Our countries are urbanizing rapidly. And if I may add, in the continent of Africa, where some of you come from, I'm sure, the rate of growth of demand for rice is growing very fast. Roughly 4% per year. One of the world's largest importers of rice is Nigeria. About 40% of the total supply of rice to the African continent all comes from Asia. So, as tastes change, as incomes grow, a lot of African populations are actually shifting to rice. Rice is more convenient to store, more convenient to cook. The tastes fit almost any diet. So that the rate of growth in the demand for rice as a staple food is growing quite fast. And we know that climate change will challenge us even more. There's temperature increases, changes in rainfall, sea level rises, and of course weather hazards. And we've been tracking this over time. Global warming is a real phenomenon. There's data to support it. In our fields, right out front of Erie, you've got an increase in temperature of roughly 2 to 4 degrees over the last 30 years. And the basic problem with temperature increases is that yields are lower. And actually this goes for almost any other agricultural commodity out there. Now, the variations in the yield are fundamentally weather. Now, this is a field that's located out front at Erie, and we're on inbreds, the best seeds, the best irrigation, the best scientists, and the best we can manage is 6.5 to 9.5 tons. In this context, as you very well know, depending on where you are doing the rice planting, it's different per location. Just 200 miles north of Los Baños, we can get for the same seed and for the same agronomy about 30% more in Nueva Ecija. Why? Simply photosynthesis. And we've got this mountain back here that's providing a shadow and collecting the clouds and preventing the photosynthesis from setting in. So one of the most recent sets of findings for rice research is that site specificity is a huge concern. And the technology that you apply for rice production has to be site specific. And you match the seeds and you match the agronomy with where you're located. Now, let's step back a bit and do some comparisons. Now, it so happens that the Philippines is a major world importer of rice, but Thailand and Vietnam are major world exporters. But if you look at the numbers, in the 40s, about 40 years ago, 50 years ago, all these countries were roughly at the same place in terms of yields, roughly the same. What changed over the years? That in 2012, last year, you've got major differences in yield. Major. Part of the story has to do with production and harvested area. You're able to multiply the number of times you plant each year by improving your capacity to irrigate your lands. And as a result, your harvested area increases dramatically. And this is the case for Thailand and Vietnam. Increase in harvest area is pretty low for the Philippines. It requires then a major investment in irrigation, so that you've got harvested area facilitated by irrigation, and you're going to be able to get major increases in total rice production. And you can compare it across the years. The fact is that in addition to the problems of production, we've also got major increases in population growth. Whereas rice production in Thailand and Vietnam was growing quite fast, their population wasn't growing as fast. So we now have about 100 million people in the Philippines versus a third less in Vietnam and Thailand. No wonder we've got problems. Across these three countries, Filipinos are much better at producing babies than producing rice. Maybe it has something to do with the Catholic Church, I don't know. But that's part of the story that we can point at. But back to the challenges of climate change. We know that sea level is rising. Depending on your climate models, the sea level will rise at least 20 centimeters to as high as 60 centimeters. And that sea level rise will influence the megadeltas. Rice is produced in the megadeltas of Asia, in the Mekong Delta, in the Red River Delta in Vietnam, in the Irrawaddy Delta in Myanmar, in Bangladesh, the low-lying plains that are fed by the major rivers of South Asia. And what's happening is that if the sea level rises, you're going to get a major increase in the sea level, and what's first to be flooded? The first areas to be flooded are, of course, the deltas. And it's in the deltas where the rice is produced. So your rice areas are going to be flooded first. So what do you do? And we've got measurements already of what happens to the deltas once sea levels rise. So we need rice that's ready for climate change. Rice that is tolerant of drought. Rice that is tolerant of salinity and submergence and flooding and heat. And this is the research that's now taking place at IRRI. And the source of that research is, of course, varietal research, mostly focused at breeding the new varieties. So let me ask you a question. How many rice varieties do you think there are? Anybody? How many varieties of rice do you think there are? Any guess? Anybody? Yes? 70,000? 70 or 7? 170. Okay, good answer, yes. 117,000. All right, I guess you saw it somewhere. There are 120,000 varieties of rice stored in the IRRI gene bank here and growing at the rate of about 2,000 varieties per month. This is a working gene bank, which means that we go in and out all the time to use the varieties that are stored in the gene bank. There's also a backup gene bank collected together with the United States Department of Agriculture in Fort Collins, Colorado. And there's, of course, the Global Genetic Diversity Trust, the Doomsday Vault in Norway. But the idea is that we keep the rice here so the scientists can look into the genetic diversity and draw the traits that they would like to use to develop new varieties. Now we also work with conservation and traditional rices and heirloom rices. There are many communities around the world, in the uplands, in the mountains, that plant very traditional varieties of rice, and they would like to keep this. And of course, there's also a cultural aspect to the rice. And not only a cultural aspect, in the market, there's a gourmet value to the rice. So we work with upland communities to preserve and to purify these varieties. But the blue skies holy grail for the research is exemplified by the work on C4 rice. C4 rice, of course, is the idea that we can change the capacity of the rice plant to process sunlight, to make it a much more efficient factory that generates the nutrients for the plant to grow and lessens its dependence on external inputs like fertilizer and water. In simple terms, we'd like the rice plant to behave more like corn or maize, much more efficient photosynthesis engine. And this research is now going on, and we expect another 15 to 20 years. But the idea is, once we're able to re-engineer the rice plant, it's going to be a much more efficient producer of food. But of course, there is bread and butter research. And this is scuba rice, able to withstand at least or up to 17 days of flooding. It's already available to many farmers, and the idea is that we take a variety that is very popular to farmers, that farmers are already using, and which consumers like. And the next step is to infuse it with the capacity, with a trait, the capacity to withstand flooding up to 17 days. An example is this farmer in India planting flood-tolerant rice. You see that he suffered a flood and his crop doesn't look good. And his colleagues were saying, just plow it under. He says, let me try this new variety, and the result is a pretty good crop. No yield penalty, even after 17 days of submergence. And this is already available to about 4 million farmers across South Asia and Southeast Asia. But of course, farmers don't know if they're going to be hit by a flood or they're going to be hit by a drought. You never know. Only God knows. Only Allah knows. So why not build in the traits for both flood tolerance as well as drought tolerance? And this is already available. It's undergoing varietal release process in a number of countries, and it's due for dissemination widely in the next year or so. In addition, there's work on, why not another trait? Flood tolerance, drought tolerance, how about salinity, or how about heat? And the work's going on these items too. Of course, there's also the problem of water shortages. And there's the technique of, very simple, of alternate wetting and drying. You don't have to flood the rice field, you just need to water it at the right time. And here's AWD that is based on very simple technology where a farmer is taught how to measure the moisture content of the soil in his field and just water at the right time. And essentially AWD enables farmers to reduce water usage by about 30%. At the end of the day, we're all about getting the rice to consumers. And of course, we'd like rice to look good, to taste good, and be preferred by people for various uses. You'd like rice to be good, to make good sushi. You'd like rice to make good soup. You'd like rice to make good, to go well with certain types of foods. And of course, you'd like your rice to be more nutritious. The problem with rice is that while it's filling, it doesn't have too much in by way of micronutrients. No zinc, no iron, no vitamin A. And so, if you look across the globe, in the major rice-eating countries, you have major micronutrient problems. And not only major micronutrient problems, you also have major diabetes problems. All because our main diets are rice. So you've got countries in Africa and South Asia in particular that really need more micronutrients. And the idea then is to infuse the staple food with zinc, iron, and vitamin A. In the Philippines, The statistics are that at least a third of children under 10 years old are malnourished. And up to 7 and 8% are severely malnourished. We know from the statistics that overall, roughly 200 million children and women are affected by vitamin A deficiency. And about 500,000 women and children die from micronutrient deficiency every year. So it's a major problem. And for lactating mothers, in the Philippines at least, a quarter are malnourished. So the idea is, we breathe micronutrients into the grain. And this is what you may have already heard about golden rice, that contains the beta-carotene that's required to combat vitamin A deficiency. Now, IRRI is a public institution funded by public resources, and so any and all of the research output of IRRI is available to everybody for free. The technology is plainly just picked up from the website. You can do that. We have no exclusive arrangements with anybody, and you can actually request for seeds just by selecting the seeds from the website. And the Rice Knowledge Bank distills the information that's been the result of the research that's going on. So here we are. It's just down the street. You're welcome to visit anytime. And if you give us prior information, we can arrange a full briefing for you. Thank you very much.